The email appeared in Lex's inbox late one night. It was one of those nights where the world outside was silent and the only sound was the hum of his computer. The subject line caught his eye immediately. Subject line: the forgotten broadcast. He almost deleted it, thinking it was just another piece of spam. Spam was relentless these days, filling his inbox with countless unwanted messages. But something made him click. The message was short, almost cryptic. It spoke of a recovered broadcast from 1978, a year that seemed so distant yet oddly significant, found in the archives of a defunct radio station. It mentioned his name. Lex felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't recognize the sender. Lex reread the email, his pulse quickening with each word. Why was his name tied to a broadcast from almost 50 years ago? It made no sense. He had no relatives who lived in that area back then. His family history was well documented, or so he thought. He tried to shake off the feeling, telling himself it was just a coincidence. It was probably a prank, a bad joke. But the more he thought about it, the less convinced he became. But the seed of doubt had been planted. He couldn't ignore it. The email gnawed at the back of his mind. Lex opened a new tab and searched for Forgotten Broadcast 1978. Nothing came up. He tried variations of the phrase, adding the name of his town and nearby cities. Still nothing. It was as if the broadcast had never existed. The lack of results was unsettling. It felt like he was chasing a ghost. It was as if the email was speaking of something that didn't exist, except it did. The sender knew his name. The sender knew his name. That fact alone made it impossible to dismiss. That's when Lex made a decision. He couldn't let this go. He wouldn't let this go. He had to find out the truth, no matter what it took. He would find out the truth. He would uncover the mystery behind the forgotten broadcast, even if it meant facing his deepest fears. He was ready to confront whatever lay ahead. This mystery had its hooks in him now. There was no turning back. He wouldn't rest until he knew what happened in 1978. The journey had just begun. Lex decided to share his discovery with his followers on Twitch. He was a variety streamer, known for his laid-back demeanor and love of all things creepy. His streams were a mix of horror games, ghost stories, and the occasional deep dive into urban legends. This email was right up his alley, albeit a bit too real for comfort. The subject line read, "Urgent, you need to see this." He hit the start streaming button and greeted his viewers. "Hey, chat," Lex began, his voice a bit shakier than usual. "Tonight's going to be a little different. I got this weird email and I think you all need to see it." He explained the email, reading it aloud. The words seemed to hang in the air, each one adding to the growing tension, and the chat exploded with questions and theories. Messages flew by at lightning speed, each one more frantic than the last. Some viewers thought it was a marketing stunt. They speculated it was a clever ploy to boost his viewership. Others urged him to investigate. They wanted him to dig deeper, to uncover the truth behind the mysterious message. Lex soaked it all in, the excitement, the fear, the curiosity. It was all palpable. He had an audience now, a community that was just as invested in this mystery as he was. He wasn't alone in this. The support from his viewers gave him the courage to move forward. He decided to reply to the email, asking for more information. The chat went wild. Minutes felt like hours. No response. The anticipation was almost unbearable. Lex tried to maintain his composure, but the tension was palpable. His mind raced with possibilities, but the tension was palpable. The room felt charged with electricity, every second stretching into an eternity. He felt like he was being watched. Every creak and groan of his apartment seemed amplified. His apartment seemed smaller, the air thicker. It was as if the walls were closing in on him. Finally, a new email appeared in his inbox. The chat erupted. The notification sound was like a jolt of electricity. Lex clicked it open, his heart pounding in his chest. The anticipation was almost too much to bear. It was a single line, an address. Simple, yet ominous. Station 103.4. The numbers seemed to echo in his mind. A quick Google search revealed it was an abandoned radio station on the outskirts of town. The place had a reputation for being haunted. Lex knew what he had to do. The decision was made in an instant. He announced to his viewers, "We're going on a road trip." The chat exploded with excitement and concern. This was going to be a night to remember. The chat room became a hive of activity. Viewers from around the world chimed in. Some shared local legends about station 103.4. It had been off the air for decades. Rumors swirled about the station being haunted. Stories of strange occurrences and unexplained noises. Lex was both excited and terrified. He pulled up Google Maps and typed in the address. It was about an hour's drive. He grabbed his keys and headed for his car. All the while, his phone kept buzzing with notifications. The internet was invested in his story now. He felt a responsibility to his viewers, to see this through. As he drove, Lex couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He checked his rearview mirror constantly. Nothing, but the feeling persisted. He turned on the radio, hoping to drown out his thoughts. Static. He tried another station, more static. He glanced at the radio display, 103.4. He slammed his hand against the radio. Silence. Lex took a deep breath. He was letting his imagination run wild. It was just an old radio station. What could go wrong? He was about to find out. The station loomed before him, a skeletal silhouette against the dying light. It was more dilapidated than the photos suggested. The building was shrouded in an eerie silence. The only sound was the wind whistling through the gaps in the boarded-up windows. Lex stepped out of his car, the cool night air biting at his skin. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He raised his phone, sharing the image of the desolate station with his viewers. The chat was going crazy. They could sense his fear. He took a deep breath and walked towards the entrance. The door creaked open with a groan, as if disturbed after a long slumber. The air inside was heavy with the smell of dust and decay. Lex flicked on his flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. Cobwebs hung from every corner like macabre decorations. The silence was deafening. He could almost hear the echoes of the past. Lex moved cautiously through the station, his flashlight illuminating the decaying grandeur. The air was thick with dust, and every step he took echoed through the empty halls, amplifying the eerie silence that enveloped the place. The main studio was in ruins. Dust-covered equipment sat dormant, frozen in time. It was as if the entire station had been abandoned in a hurry, leaving behind a snapshot of a bygone era. He ran his fingers over a vintage microphone, imagining the voices it once carried, the stories, the music, the news broadcasts, all now just echoes in the silence. He found the control room, its walls lined with soundproof foam that was now crumbling with age. The room felt like a relic from another time, a place where countless hours had been spent creating and controlling the airwaves. A single monitor flickered on the desk, its screen filled with static. The sight was unsettling, a ghostly reminder of the station's former life. Lex felt a chill run down his spine. There was no way that monitor should be on. The power had been cut off years ago, yet here it was, flickering as if trying to communicate. The station had been abandoned for years. Nature had begun to reclaim the building, with vines creeping through broken windows and the roof showing signs of collapse. As he explored further, he discovered boxes filled with old reel-to-reel tapes. Each box was a treasure trove of history, containing recordings that had once been broadcast to countless listeners. Labels were faded, but some were still legible. They hinted at the content of the tapes, offering a glimpse into the past. He saw dates from the 1970s. The tapes were decades old, yet they had survived the passage of time. His heart skipped a beat as he noticed a tape labeled July 12, 1978. The date mentioned in the email he had received. The date mentioned in the email, it was a clue, a piece of the puzzle he had been trying to solve. He carried the tape back to the control room, placing it on the desk next to the flickering monitor. His mind raced with possibilities. As he did so, he noticed something strange. A sense of unease washed over him. A VHS tape was slotted into the player below the monitor. It was an odd sight, given the age of the equipment. He hadn't noticed it before, concealed as it was in the shadows. The tape seemed to beckon him, urging him to uncover its secrets. He pressed play, his curiosity overriding his better judgment. The screen flickered to life, and he braced himself for whatever was about to unfold. Section 6. The Loop. The monitor flickered, and then an image appeared. It was a view of the radio station, but not the dilapidated ruin Lex was standing in. This was the station in its prime. Cars filled the parking lot. People moved with purpose. It was like looking through a window into the past. Lex watched in fascination as the scene unfolded. He saw a younger version of himself, walking towards the station. He felt a surge of disorientation. Was this some kind of elaborate prank? He glanced at the VHS player. The timer displayed 0000. It was rewinding. The tape replayed, showing the same scene over and over again. Lex tried to look away, but he couldn't. He was transfixed by the image of his younger self. He watched as he entered the station, disappearing from view. Lex's mind raced. What was the meaning of this loop? Was it a warning, or a glimpse into a forgotten past? He had to know more. He reached for the tape, but as his fingers brushed against the plastic casing, the image on the monitor distorted, the colors swirling into a vortex of static. Section 7. Static and shadows. The static on the monitor intensified, filling the room with an ear-splitting screech. Lex covered his ears, but the sound seemed to pierce through his skull. He felt a presence in the room, something dark and cold. The air grew heavy, making it difficult to breathe. He turned, his flashlight beam dancing across the room. He thought he saw figures lurking in the shadows, their forms indistinct but their eyes glowing with an eerie light. Whispers seemed to emanate from the walls, murmuring his name. He stumbled back, knocking over a shelf of old equipment. The crash echoed through the station, momentarily breaking the spell. The static on the monitor ceased abruptly, replaced by the same grainy footage of the parking lot. The loop was back, but something had changed. He was now part of it. Section 8. On the air. The young Lex on the screen reached the door of the station and turned, looking directly at the camera, or rather at Lex. Their eyes met across time and space, and in that instant Lex felt a connection, a shared destiny. The scene shifted. Lex was no longer observing. He was experiencing. He felt himself walking into the station, drawn by an unseen force. He recognized everything: the musty smell, the peeling paint on the walls, the echo of his own footsteps. He found himself standing before a microphone, headphones clamped over his ears. The red light on the console blinked, indicating he was on the air. Panic surged through him. He didn't know what he was doing, what he was supposed to say. Then he heard a voice in his headphones, a deep, raspy voice that seemed to slither into his mind. It spoke of secrets, of a hidden truth that would be revealed. It spoke of the broadcast and of the role Lex had to play. Section 9. The broadcast continues. Lex tried to pull away, to break free from the unseen force that held him captive, but it was no use. He was trapped, his fate intertwined with the forgotten broadcast. He felt his mouth moving, forming words that were not his own. The voice in his headphones grew stronger, guiding his every word. It spoke of a darkness that was spreading, a malevolence that threatened to consume all. It spoke of a ritual, of a sacrifice that had to be made. His voice, amplified through the speakers, filled the empty halls of the station. It reached out beyond the confines of time and space, carried on the airwaves to an unknown audience. He could feel their presence now, a multitude of minds listening in the darkness. The broadcast wasn't over. It had just begun, and Lex was the vessel, the conduit through which the darkness would speak.